Hello, my name is Brant, B-R-A-N-T, Hunt, and my channel is called Discerning What is True. And today we're going to do part two. That is the recordings I did last night from Alvin Kuhn on the shadow of the third century. And the title of the chapter is called Paul Knows Not Jesus, K-N-O-W-S. And again, this is from a esoteric work or a Gnostic work, however you would like to call it. And so I wanted to read this particular part of this book today and share it with you. And thank you for being here. And so let's get into the book here that Alvin Kuhn has shared with us, some what I call hidden knowledge that's been hidden from many people. Here we go. It is now proven beyond cavit that the divine man, uttering not a single true word that was not in the Jewish, Greco-Egyptian, Gnostic Christian books, long antedating his period. What they took for a flashing new revelation was, as they so soon found to their confusion and dismay, just the old esoteric wisdom, which they at once transformed in their pitiable, that is, incompetent intelligence, that is, intellects, into frenzy breeding literal history. That's been going on for over, 1700 years. The barriers, the natural or cultural safeguards with which God has endeavored to shield man against his own too ready gullibility did not succumb in the case of the apostles to, quote, superior wisdom. It must at last be said they were burned away by the excess of fiery zeal that swept them like a prairie on woodland's blades, under the force of persuasions that in others were restrained and moderated balance of philosophical understanding. But the Christian disciples hated philosophy. Therefore, they had not the salutary benefit of its rational modulators, I should say. Time and again, a sectarian group has stood forth and demanded the homage and promised its rewards to the faith of the whole human race. It is being glaringly repeated at this age as often before. Let me say something here. The Catholics and even the Reformers were actually at war with each other. Did you know that? You know that the Catholics destroyed many of the works that they actually copied and then used it to befuddle other people. Are you aware of that? It's really sad that people have not seen these things or don't want to see them, I should say. It's not that they don't want to see them. I mean, they don't want to see them. They don't want it. They don't want to. They don't want to see the truth. Is what's so sad about the whole situation. And this is the overwhelming, not only majority of people, you see. Anyway, that's my take on it. Millman, with the centuries of Christian history under the eye as a fate accompanied, to lead sanction to his reconstruction of the prophetic visions of the apostles, an instance of how the reconstruction of Christian history is colored by modern imagination, subtle casts in the assumption that this was the one instance in which the sectarian group in question offered in reality the one true universal religion. Yes, the gem of precious assumption thus slightly dropped into our intellectual treasure box by Millman is that these illiterate fishermen had fully, clearly, with the highest and profoundest intellectual rationalism, comprehended the whole system of superable wisdom as none had ever comprehended it before, and therefore he can place them as standing before the world with this lamp of truth to demand his homage and offer his gleaming rewards. Out of all this discussion should emerge the same conclusion that the matter of supreme importance is the verdict to be arrived at as to why this one proclamation of narrow religious sectarianism succeeded to such a prodigious extent, while hundreds of more or less similar effusions of pietist zealotry did not? The answer to that question is the one thing that transcends moment to the future of the human race. That crucial knowledge is what this work is aimed to establish on the strength of irrefragable data. The presentation of that body of data demands much space, but the matter adduced so far points to the major element on the answer. Element in the answer, I should say. The prime fact that the legend of Messiah's coming had finally been materialized in human history and fulfilled in the birth and life of a personal Savior, and that the scriptures were converted from a metaphysical realm of reference to an external occurrence in order to uphold this interpretation, all of which directly and powerfully challenged the interest and seduced the loyalty of the lower masses. But the very pertinent question also arises. If Christianity grew out of Jewish roots, why did Judaism repudiate it? Here's the nub indeed. Obviously, they did not accept it for the very good reason that it announced the Messiah had not come in the form and matter at all congruous with their ideas. So it didn't, their ideas of a Messiah coming, that is the Jews, didn't fit with them. So it wasn't congruent to their thinking. So this is the reason why, part of the reason why they rejected it. Except probably among the most crudely ignorant, they were not prepared to receive the divine avatar or Messiah in the low character and status of a mere mortal man. This description demeaned their lofty conceptions of deity epiphany on earth to a nadir of concreteness impossible for them to accept. They could not endorse the embodiment of the second person of the cosmic Trinity and a eon of the supreme God co-equal with him from the foundation of the world in the fleshly person of a Galilean carpenter. The intelligent Hebrew would want to know how such powers of cosmic range could be housed in a single body of mortal decay. They were not prepared to look for the Logos to come walking through the streets of their village. What the instructed Jew was looking for in the Messiah tradition was the coming into the world of the universal spirit of divine wisdom and power, truth and righteousness, first developed to dynamic expression through their theocratic Israelite kingdom, and from them being disseminated throughout all of the world. So they were looking for a Israeli kingdom, you see, to take over the world, so to speak here. Is that what they're saying? Seems like it. You see, they were looking for power because simply they were considered the small fragments of the population of the world. Naturally, he was taken aback by the sudden announcement that Messiah had already come in the form and person of a given man in Galilee. If one has defined the word Messiah as a spirit of unified law and love emanating or to emanate all human beings, he will not welcome the proclamations of his presence in one single individual. It is important to recall here Gegenberg's succinct statement that a Hebrew mind could not countenance the thought of the ineffable majesty of the Godhead, so sacred that he feared even to pronounce its Jehovahistic name, being, quote, enclosed within the narrow confines of a human body, end quote. Our work could well stop with this note and make it the culminating point of the exegesis, for it strikes the key that correctly sounds forth the consummated thesis of the dissertation. If Milman can work his mind to a pitch of rhapsody intoxication over the conception that the half-demeaned band of Palestine zealots were offering to the world, its first true and universal religion, he does so in complete disregard of the sobering fact that this is all highest religion was offered to mankind on the terms of a predation, which itself contradicted, flouted, and outrageously demeaned one of the most sacred considerations of all wise sages of a glorious antiquity. All astute philosophy has agreed that to localize supreme deity in a given concreteness, even to define it in terms of a human conception, is to defame it. How strongly then a philosophical mind would derogate the religion that presented the whole majestic being of the Godhead in the pitiable, feeble scope of expression offered by a human body, so that the surpassing boon of a true and universal religion that Millman, in a grandiose flourish of rhetoric, says Christianity first profited to the human race, was not only not a true religion at all, but on the contrary, that which is offered as a supreme blessing. The incarnation of Messiah in one man of flesh was itself a conception that had been endlessly scrutinized before and rejected as a base hypothesis, infinitely dishonoring to the ineffable supreme. In brief, it is a staggering truth that the central and pivotal proposition advanced by Christianity, the one that carried its appeal with winning force to the millions of uncritical minds everywhere, was a tenet of religious speculation long regarded as so infamous and defamatory of the Godhead that its respectful silence was tactfully imposed on human thought and inquiry with respect to it. To suggest to philosophers that this unthinkable majesty of being could not only be named but also incorporated in the confines of a single human body was a thorough horrendously beyond belief. Could anything then more completely indicate the low intellectual state of the religious group that would blare abroad the message that the divine mind and nature had taken residence in the body of a peasant in Judea? To think of the Logos as being made 170 pounds of human flesh, this was unconscionable. But if the Jew rejected with shocking reverence the personal incarnation of God in one man, this did not impute his true interest in the Messianic idea. By no means did his rejection of any man, Jesus closed the door against the sane doctrine of the Advent. In truth, it opened the door to his understanding of that coming and all the height and depth of his real historical denouncement, where it left him free to conceive of it in the one and only way in which it can be naturally envisioned, as the birth, growth, and eventual rulership of the spirit of charity in all hearts. If it was a blaspheming defamation of deity to think of it as being cribbed, cabinet, and confined within the pitiable limitations of one human form, it was quite a different matter to consider the mind of Christ as coming to gradual dominance at the very core of consciousness in all men. So Gegenberg writes that while the Hebrew mind could not accede to the recognition of the Logos Messiah as incarnated in Jesus of Nazareth or any man of flesh, it was not the less expectant of the actual advent of a Christly motif in the lives of men and nations. Quote, but it was proposition easy to reconcile with Paul's Christology, or rather closely allied to it, when the apostles' fundamentally declaration is recalled that the, quote, the Lord is the Spirit, end quote. The Judeo religion contemplated, I should say, the coming of Messiah in the form of a spiritual regeneration that would glorify mankind in the solidarity of brotherhood under the moral law that had been emanated from Mount Sinai. It did not envision it from the form of the birth of a babe. It realized that there is only one form in which the Christ can arise to all men, a new spirit in the heart and new intelligence in the mind. A Christian pronouncement of the Messiah coming did not in any measure fulfill the Hebraic expectation of the Savior. Of that high and mystical conception, the Bethlehem, quote, event was but a gross, misshapen caricature, and was accordingly rejected. The delusion that the Christos can come, has come to the world in the form of a historical human, that he comes singular and not collectively, it is close to the most famous imbecility that has ever engrossed man's consciousness. Indeed, Christianity must answer to the ages the um, opprobrious accusation that he had offered the Christ mind to the world in but one man and not in all men. You see, that's the crux of the matter here. You see, why would it be, in one man? That is the final summation of all the stricture that this work marshals against Christianity. Is the ultimate the focus and core of all critique of Christianity. We have descended on the church at Antioch, the one at Corinth demands, notice also, when Paul speaks of the church of God, which is at Corinth, end quote, it must not be understood that he is referring to an organized congregation in the later Christian sense. It was one of those communities of esoteric students cultivating the mystical and intellectual philosophy, theoretically and practically. Little did they dream of initiating a movement that would eventually establish a great priestly commonwealth and virtually rule the world. In short, neither Paul nor his contemporaries could justly be considered as members of the historical Christian church. They were bound together only by the strength of kinship in a high mystical experience. Indeed, the historian described this fellowship as a, quote, anarchy of full dependency upon direct divine guidance, end quote. It is, quote, self-governing and controlled by the hazardous suggestion of the inspired, end quote. And well, we know, he adds, that the, quote, the directly inspired are the natural enemies of all ecclesiastic orders, end quote. Yeah, that's what they don't like about it. That's the main thing right there. He says basically directly inspired. Those are the very few. I mean, they're very, very few are inspired because they seek the truth. Are going to be natural enemies of those who are part of the priestcraft. I call them the priestcraft. You see, the priests that who make money off of people and tell them lies and act like they're very holy when in reality they're not holy at all. They're not even close to being holy. And all the things that they've done in history, the atrocities that they've done to other people. If you didn't believe in what they said, they put you to death. Really? Where does that come from? Uh, you but that's when you take a literal interpretation of what you think is in the Old Testament, that you think that simply is that God destroyed certain cities and such. And that's not true, because we can't find any evidence of it, folks. There's no evidence of the flood, Noah, ever. And I've said that yesterday. It would take an army of people to actually even bring those quote unquote animals, male and females, and food and water and everything else, and build the quote unquote craft that he's building. You see. Yet, when after centuries of a far worse anarchy, rather a tyranny of ecclesiastic power, people under the system turned against its overweening and overreaching center of control and threw off the yoke of its strangling clutch. They did so precisely in order to regain this, quote, anarchy, end quote, of the spirit, in the effort to set up again the dynamics of communion directly with divine guidance. And all through its history, the publicists of this system have advertised their intellectual insincerity by alternating exalting to the heavens the same subjective mystical communion which links the soul of man escalately with the divine Shekinah. It's not the right pronouncing. Shekinah. Sorry, it's Shekinah. Lauding it as the climax of Christian spiritual attainment, superior to anything in pagan religious experience, and again condemning it, especially when it was the experience of pagans as the quote anarchy, end quote, of wild license in the mystical domain. Once the powerful ecclesiastic organism was in full authority, the sunblindness of subjective ecstasies through the individual spirit melt into the very soul of God in rapturous union, but were it outside the pale of the churchly authority, had to be frowned upon. Once the church of God held sway, all personal benignism must come through its channels or be condemned. The Protestant Reformation did indeed fling a large segment of revolters free of this outrageous imprisonment. But alas, it made but the first halting steps away from the prison door and stands there uncertain whether to proceed and badly confused as to the location of his goal of his home or his home. Yeah, they actually, in some ways, actually open the door to how would I say it? Allow more choice, but yet still doesn't lead to truth. That's it. That's what the Protestant Reformation brought. It got other people who, okay, I can see that, I can see that, but you can. I'm going to say this very clear, folks. He the Augustine was the father of the Catholic Church. He was the father of the Eastern Orthodox Church in some ways, and he definitely was the father of the Protestant Reformation. What I mean by that, they follow his teachings. Augustine, you see. So they didn't. They maybe made the first step in quote unquote allowing opportunity for others, so to speak, worship. But then they got along. They went right back together and stayed the same way. You know, this go to churches and see what they believe, such and such way believe, such and such, da 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 da. You speak it out in the Holy Writ, you see. And people memorize that. That's the only thing they memorize, you see, in the church after being said so many times. And they really don't even know what they're saying when they say it. Because they don't the pastors and the priests don't even bother to explain it. Because I wonder if even the priests themselves know it, you see. Anyway, our work is designed to prove that the unsound ideas that generate Christianity contributed to induce a fearful dementia in Western mentality. What it could do to rationalize the mind of Augustine, it would do in tenfold measure to lesser people, says Farrar, Farrar. Augustine's, quote, personality becomes less attractive as his episcopacy becomes more triumphant, until at last a man who sighed so ardently for Christian charity was so much opposed to sacerdotal tyranny uses expressions and arguments which become the boasted watchwords of the most ruthless inquisitors and quoted to sanction deeds to so unchristian and so infamous as the brutalities of Alva, Alva, and the massacre of St. Bartholomew. Here indeed is a psychograph of a great value, tracing in most vivid relief the horror warpings of mind on the Christian corruption. On him directly most writers of the Christian saga lay the blame for the Holocaust of medieval murder. He set up the wandering authority which later lent sanction to this sickening chapter of, quote, Christian history, end quote. One of the twisted mentalities of early Christian, quote, saints like Augustine, like Jerome, Tertullian, and others, whose consciences were captivated and racked with the deadly concepts of sin, issued that the black and turbulent stream of morbidity that has darkened the lives of billions in their train. We have seen how Augustine and Jerome mentally lashed themselves for having yielded momentarily to the delight of reading Homer or Virgil and other classic literature. It can be said that the Christianity bequeathed to the West a sickly mind, a deranged, darksome view of life, and a psychopathic, haunting obsession of the evil of happiness. And this is another idea. You're not supposed to be happy, you know. Yeah, it's you're just supposed to be, you know, you act a part, but reality, acting is not the truth, is it? At this point, it is more than interesting to compare two insertions standing on the same page in our notebook. The first is from Lecky, L-E-C-K-Y, quote, The History of European Morals, page 99. Quote, religion is the one romance of the poor. It alone extends the narrow horizon of their thoughts, supplies the images of their dreams, allures them to the supersensual, end quote. The other is from Dr. McDonald Baird, Baird, B-A-Y-N-E, The Higher Power You Can Use, in page 41. Quote, but thousands have lost their lives, many murdered in cold blood because of a crystallized concept held immovable in the minds of many people. The secret of growth and understanding is to have a flexible mind so that we can receive new knowledge and discard old worn out concepts that are hindering the progress of humanity, end quote. The juxtaposition of these two observations, both supremely wise, is next to tragedy in its shocking revelation of man's pitiable victimization by his own feebleness. The romanticism of religion need, however, not be restricted to the core. It is the one ultimate possibility of romance for the human mind, if the far reach of the influence is taken into account. It is the one avenue of escape from the deadly uh, tawdriness of moral themes for rich and poor alike. It is the one thing that man instinctively flees to when he rises above the sheer interest in physical existence and the objective focus of interest. When the sweetness of its release of the soul from bondage to material interest is one felt, there is no delight to be cherished equal to the power to vivify the enjoyment of life itself. It is, or can be truly, man's savior. See, most people who are Christians are the most unhappy people out there. They are. They're unhappy. See, they drank to the wine, so to speak. Basically, um, everything they see. If you're not a Christian, it's a very critical eye, so to speak. But the tragedy side of this noble interest comes to view in the second observation. The golden allure of the sweets of religion can so soon become a deadly Midas touch. The Cathar Upanicus of India says, speaking of the Lord of life, the divine soul at the heart of all consciousness, quote, with sharp and subtle mind is he beheld, end quote. At last, the religious mind of man is not commonly either sharp or subtle. It is naive, is dull, not keenly discerning. It does not sacrificiously choose among all the alternates and possibilities. It sees generally only what chances to come in front of it. And if there be a bit of novelty to stir interest in this segment of truth, it fastens it upon itself with eager readiness and deadly finality. The concept then takes control of the mind, accepting it and molding or molds the whole personality over the pattern, over its pattern, I should say. The pity is that when one mentally seeing occupies the stage of vision, it shuts out all the others. The price of our possession of a truth is the privation of all other truth, you see. Unless indeed the sharp and subtle intellect can develop the power and breadth of vision to include practically all segments in a universal organic construct of meaning, in which each truth can be fitted into the proper place in harmony with all other facades. But if it's only the few, the philosophers, who can manage this synthetic accomplishment, the commonality of souls remain steeped in dormancy of intellect. They are unawakened to the keenness of perception and lack the power to hold and relate the many data together in one view. They see through a glass darkly and see in part. As their attention becomes fixed on one part and that out of its context in the larger whole, they are blind to what is still not in the range of vision, which, if seen, would alter even the significance of the little section that is in view, for all values are relative. To give absolute meaning or value to a fraction of the whole instead of a relative value is the crime constantly perpetrated by ignorance. It is the crime of naivety. The greatest, most telling and thrilling enterprise, the highest joy open to mankind, is the growth of the power of the mind to discern the relations of the knowledge fragments to the whole context of ultimate meaning. Modern psychology has come to see that the prime conditions of health for the human mind inheres is the ability to integrate its components. This demands, as Hawkins of Harvard has said, a consultation with, quote, the total meaning of the world, end quote. This is a supreme lesson which education can bring to its hopeful matrix. And for this reason, it is a striking necessity that the ancient, quote, divine philosophy, end quote, be restored to its place of central status, I should say, in in the curriculum of all education. I'm sorry, curriculum of all the educations. One letter's not correct here. Okay. And all too clearly can it now be seen that Christianity's spite at philosophy, its divorce of religion from philosophy, stands as the consummated wreckage of human culture aims. In ancient philosophy, was embodied the vast knowledge vouchsafed to early races by semi-divine intelligence, which outlined enough of the cosmic perspective for the capable mind to perceive the place and part man was to fill in his relation to the scope of the whole. In throwing out the cosmology and anthropology, the hierarchy ranks of beings in the evolutionary graduate, the multiple spiritual, psychic, ethical, and physical constitutes bodies of man's nature. Christianity despoiled both philosophy and religion of their structural regulative frame of reference. For humans to form judgments without possessing the whole of the data or some knowledge of the ultimate plan and design of the creative mind is to leap in the dark. This was the reason why the Syncretistic philosophers of antiquity made so much of the symbol of the sun and its light. They likened the luminary of day to the divine intelligence. It was a symbol, you see. Mind brought to the multitudinously objects of the world a light of understanding because it revealed all things standing in relation to each other and to the whole, in the same way that sunlight, by making things visible at their place in the context, gives meaning to all visible objects. Correct. Darkness prevents this vision of relationship, hence a meaning. All human wills are therefore due to imperfect mental vision, limitation of range, and inability to see enough of the all to form true judgments about any part. Had Greek wisdom not been blocked out by the surge of piety rendered unintelligent by the crushing philosophy, the Christian culturalism would not have plunged into the unconscionable blunder of building a new faith on the epiphany of divine life allegedly manifested in one historical person. For this would have been seen as an undue allocation of significance to one item of supposedly historical fact standing without relation to or support from larger segments of the context. For the race of man can never be divinized by the glow of deity shining on the face of one avatar. The leaven must permeate the whole lump. Divinity outside of man is a glory of life, but only a divinity born, reared, and magnified, and made king inside a mortal man will convert him into the God he is to be. The glorified life, mission, and meaning of the one Christ claimed for history stands utterly out of possible harmonious relationship to the total of the evolutionary scheme. It can find no niche of perfect articulation into which it alone fits. The Protestant Reformation itself established the thesis that the fragment of God in the individual can make complete union with the God of all. And in so doing, it reduced to Subius Plotius status that not only the Roman Catholic hierarchy immediacy, but the similar immediacy of the man Jesus. And an external historical Jesus is rendered not only not indispensable, but not even necessary. He might be ancillary and auxiliary. He certainly is not essential. The scheme of salvation can ignore him, dispense with him. The individual soul can make its own peace with God. The high priest of God, king of righteousness after the order of Melchizedek, is a oversoul of intelligence within the area of the individual consciousness. Tertullian's errant challenge to the intelligence of his day can now be reversed. Instead of asking what Homer, Plato, and academia philosophy had to do with the Gospels of Jesus, the proper question now is what have Jesus in the Gospels, that is, taken as history, of course, to do with the deification of the Christ in man? Remember that we're going to be doing another book here. We're going to be sharing a book here from Gerald Massey called The Historical Jesus and the Mythical Christ. And what he's pointing out, the historical Jesus is not true. There was no Jesus, you see. But the mythical Christ is where it's at, you see. But they brought these two names together at the Council of Nicaea and created the word Jesus and also Christos and brought them together instead of Jesus Christ in order to confuse people again. And the book I would be simply as the, will be what this particular book I'm talking about is Historic Jesus, and we'll be reading soon. I've got an interlibrary loan of the book here, so we're going to try to read that one. But anyway, let's continue here. And I lost my place here. Okay. So what Homer? Okay. So what they're saying simply is okay. All right. What does philosophy have to do with Jesus? Or Plato and academic philosophy had to do with the Gospels of Jesus. The proper question now is what have Jesus and the Gospels, that is taken this history course I just said, to do with the deification of the Christ and man? On what basis do they have a claim to be considered a central element in the subjective kingdom and activity of the Christ and every man? You see. And this would explain that. This is a book by Manny P. Hall, and it simply says the pineal gland is the eye of God. That's where the action takes place, you see. And but this is a gland that takes place, and it basically doesn't have any purpose. Except the purpose is the light is within you, but you have to understand where you're at, and eventually will lead you to the truth. And then one day maybe you will have what I would call the ascension moment, or others say enlightenment, that takes place when that light shines within your brain. You see. So that what I'm saying simply here is that the Christ is already in you, but you've got to wake him up. You got to wake up yourself too. You see. On what basis do they have a claim to be considered an essential element in the subjective kingdom and activities of Christ in every man? How do the extraneous and fortuitous events and personalities in almost totally uncertified chapter of Judean history become uniquely an integrated part of the structure of cosmic and human racial evolution? Would the failure of the man Jesus to appear in history at that specific period have left man bereft of a central stairway to heaven? Had Plato and the philosophers, even common men, no access to redeeming grace and power from the sheer fact that they lived some centuries before the Galilean had come? You see that. If people don't think about that question, it's a good question. What happens to all the people, quote unquote, before Christ? You see, that kind of muddies the water, doesn't it? It muddies the water considerably. So they never had an opportunity for, quote unquote, to be free, to become a Christian, so to speak. See, that most pastors and most theologians won't talk about that. You see, because you got history of antiquity all the way back before that. Okay, kind of really sours the dough, doesn't it? When the fact of the developing Christhood in one and all men is framed in its proper place and relationship in and the whole scheme of human evolution, it is at once seen that the narrow views that confine the idea of the advent of the deified mind to a unique manifestation is only one man is untenable, since it negates the race that it is to be transformed by a power that can do its work from nowhere but within each individual. This treatment almost absurdly belabors a point that should be fully clear on first view, but it has to have the excessive reiteration because of the obdurate blinders to it that the afflicted one-third of the human race with dementia and horror over nearly 2,000 years. Dementia. Interesting. They use that word. That's before we even had the dementia we talk about today. So forgetting, not knowing who you are. The concluding word could be that the human effect to bring in its inherited deity to conscious function and lordship of life has stood paralyzed into inanity by the Christian legend that the race is to be apotheosized by divinity once resident of Judea. Not again will Western man take up seriously the task of consummating his deification until he realizes of a certainty that the work must be done by the function of divinity in the Western lands, not in Judea. The redeeming Christ he has been taught to look to for his salvation must relocate, transfer from Palestine to where he lives in the West, and finally from any outward location geographically to this final location spiritually within the area of his present human consciousness. The redemption of Occidental civilization depends upon the reordination in Christian theology. Yet, the religious romanticism of untrained, uncritical minds, combined with the Stoic inflexibility of ideals held by the masses, has written its record across the history of 20 centuries in such revolving script that the darksome pages have to be hidden from general sight. Since the reading bends down the human spirit with shame and humiliation, past endurance, the annuals of the one true and glorious religion that was to emancipate the human mind from the blindness of heathen error should make joyous reading. From the herald birth of the Luciferian messenger. To the latest person of churchly hallelujah. This work is aimed to tell the reason at last why, on the contrary, they make the most harrowing story in history. Likely descends most forcefully upon the deadly inertia, the indolence and sluggishness of the common human mind, which is the immediate parent of nearly all human ills and woes. Intellectual incompetency and sheer idleness and inertia generate the moral error and delinquency that breeds every evil. The human mind, not nourished by the food of truth, reason, and understanding, becomes a sick mind bred Christianity. You see, the idea simply is that man is spirit, and we seem to have forgotten that. And somehow we think that some man that comes here named Jesus is going to save us. Well, he's not spirit, folks. He's just a human being. And the other question you must ask yourself simply is why would God incarnate here? Because he would be spirit. And I know there are these people that say, "Oh, well, he changed in such and such human." No, 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 no. That already means a red flag. Why would God why would God incarnate here on earth? I keep saying this to people. Why would he? Makes no sense. Because he's spirit. He's total spirit. He's far more than anything we are, folks, in a lot of ways. Although we came from there. That's what people don't understand too. Rufinus accused Jerome of a change in interpolation in a manuscript, says Farrar, F-A-R-R-A-R, quote, "The antidote, however, has its value, for it shows us the prevalence of forgery and puts us on our guard against hereditary interpolations in the works of the fathers," end quote. Yeah, there's another thing simply. Who's watching these guys? You see. This Jerome is who frankly writes of those who visited and then left him in his decent retreat. Quote, "Lo, they desire to depart. Nah, they do depart, saying that it is better to live among wild beasts than with such Christians." End quote. The full force of this fling of Jerome's pen will be caught when a chapter of treatment is given to the item of Christian asceticism and monarchicism. This is where people used to do this, go out in the middle of nowhere and basically say, well, they're going to stay away from sin. And so they think that basically when they go into a place where there's nobody there around, the problem is they forget that simply is themselves, their mind, in a lot of ways, has its trappings too, you see. This is the idea even of the monastery. We're going to separate such and such. But reality simply is you're still, your mind's there. And that's where you think all your thoughts come from your mind. your ideas of greatness, your ideas of failure, or your ideas of uh, thoughts that are, horrible, or thoughts of goodness, you see. It, however, offers a foretaste of the low, almost inhuman condition to which Christians were reduced by their obsession with the legend of a historical Christ whom Paul either never heard of, though he visited with his brother, or hearing of him, resolved never to mention his existence. And that is the end of the chapter. That is chapter 15. Came quickly there. And we may go into chapter 16 a little later today. We'll see how I feel. Appreciate you being here. Um, I want to say this very clear, and I keep saying this. If God is spirit, which he is, why would he come here unless he was in spirit? You see, why would it be necessary for God to come and be a human here? That makes no sense. That would mean that God would put himself down to come here in the first place, which he would never do. Okay? You see, this is how faulty this whole system is. It just gradually crumbles. So we'll probably do chapter 16 a little later today, maybe evening, which will be called Great Pan is Dead. This will be chapter 16 of this particular book by Alvin Kuhn. I appreciate you all being here, and I wish you a good day. And I didn't want to make it too long today. Again, it's about 45 minutes, so that's where I want to stop it. And thank you, and I wish you a pleasant day. You take care. We'll see you soon.